It happens at 14 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, local time everywhere, because there is no local time for this, the same instant on every clock on the planet, without a countdown, without a warning, and the first sign a stickman figure gets is not a sound, it is the sudden absence of weight in their own body, the vertigo of a foot pressing down on nothing. A stickman figure 11 floors up on a construction scaffold feels the tool belt lift off his hip half a second before he understands his boots have left the plank, and by the time his mind catches up he is 2 meters above it and rising, the plank rising with him, loose screws and buckets drifting free, because there is nothing left to hold any of it down. On a fishing boat offshore, a stickman figure watches the water beneath the hull go still in a way water is not supposed to go still, then watches the whole boat lift clear of the surface, then the surface itself lift after it, rising in a slow silent sheet with no waves in it, because waves need gravity to fall back into. Birds already in flight tumble upward in slow uncontrolled spirals, wingbeats producing motion but no direction, because flight was never about wings, it was always about wings pulling against a weight that has just stopped existing. In 4 seconds, every unanchored object on Earth is in the air. Cars lift off streets, wheels still spinning against a road no longer under them. Roofing tiles rise off houses in cascades. Dogs and cattle lift with legs paddling at nothing, bodies turning slowly with no floor left to orient against. Stickman figures everywhere, sidewalks, kitchens, classrooms, beaches, feel their feet leave whatever they were standing on and rise through the rooms they were standing in a moment ago, some screaming, some silent with the silence of a body that has run out of instructions, hands grabbing at railings and each other, most finding nothing. The ones who catch a railing hold on with both arms locked, bodies streaming out horizontal like flags in a wind that is not wind, because their own mass wants to keep rising. The ones who catch nothing keep rising, past the rooftops, past the treetops, past the height where falling would ever have been survivable, and they do not fall, because there is nothing left to fall toward. 10 seconds in, the ocean rises as one continuous sheet of water kilometers wide, breaking at the edges into slabs the size of city blocks, fish suspended in floating bubbles of seawater, whole coral formations lifting off the seabed in slow clouds of stone. 30 seconds in, buildings groan under a stress they were never built for, everything inside trying to leave through the ceiling, furniture drifting up through stairwells, unbolted machinery tearing free of factory floors, roof sections lifting away like lids off boxes. 40 seconds in, dust and soil across every farmland on the planet lift into a haze that turns the sky brown from the ground up, and every loose boulder on every unstable slope begins separating from ground it has rested on for thousands of years. 50 seconds in, the highest of the risen debris, water, cars, roofing, boulders, birds, bodies, is higher than the aircraft already in the sky, now tumbling without lift, because lift was never free, it was always borrowed against a gravity that has just called in the debt. And then, at exactly 60 seconds, with no more warning than it started, gravity returns. Everything that went up comes down at once, from wherever it happened to be, at whatever speed 60 seconds of unresisted rising had built into it, and there is no controlled version of that sentence. The ocean that rose as a sheet does not settle back onto a coastline, it falls onto 1 kilometers of seawater arriving from above with the force of collapse rather than a wave, every coastal city on every continent receiving the same event in the same few seconds, not a tsunami traveling toward shore but the shore's own ocean falling out of the sky on top of it. The aircraft that lost lift come down as aircraft, not gliders. The stickman figures who kept rising for 60 seconds come down from heights with no survivable version, all of them, everywhere, in the same few seconds. The boulders that separated from mountainsides land as landslides on every unstable slope at once. The furniture and roofing that tore free of buildings crash back down through the same ceilings they left, and most of the buildings do not hold. The dust that hung suspended for a minute falls as one planet-wide layer of grit over every surface still standing. This is the first 60 seconds. The rest of it does not get shorter. In the hours after, the stickman figures still able to move are moving through cities with no recognizable streets, cars stacked upside down in shopfronts and embedded in second-floor windows, in shapes a minute of falling produced instead of the shapes traffic ever produced. The floodwater does not recede the way a normal tsunami's runoff recedes. It sits, kilometers of it, inland, because the coastline underneath it has changed shape, drainage crushed by the same fall that put the water there, still standing a week later, dark with debris. Emergency response, the thing that exists to arrive from somewhere a disaster did not reach, does not function, because this disaster reached everywhere in the same 6 seconds, and every hospital and airport that could send help has its own version of the same wreckage outside its own doors. Communication networks are down in every country at once, because every relay tower and satellite dish was airborne with everything else, and stickman figures searching the rubble for their families are doing it without a network to tell them where to look. Within the first week the shape of what happened becomes clear, and it is not a coastal disaster, it is a species-wide one. Farmland on every continent lost its topsoil to the same 60 seconds the ocean was airborne, and the crops that survived the lifting did not survive the falling. Livestock airborne for 60 seconds landed as a mass extinction event distributed evenly across every farm on the planet. The ports that move everything a global population depends on are gone, their cranes and ships in the water they sit on airborne together and never landing back in any configuration a port requires. Every stock exchange on Earth opens to the same discovery, that the infrastructure behind every warehouse, shipping lane, and data center took the same 60 seconds of damage at the same time, and there is no mechanism built for a shock with no geographic edge, because this one does not have an outside. By the end of the first month the aftershocks are still arriving, not from any fault line but from the ground settling under the redistributed mass of everything that fell back onto it in the wrong place, so a stickman figure who moved into a building that looked intact can wake to a ceiling that decided, a month late, to finish falling. The sky has not returned to what it was. The dust load has not settled, and sunsets everywhere now carry a heavier orange than they used to, a permanent reminder written into the atmosphere, and stickman figures who look up out of habit are learning a new habit instead of not looking up. Months in, the response has stopped looking like recovery and started looking like adaptation to a permanent condition. Cities are not rebuilt on their old footprints, because the coastlines those footprints depended on no longer exist in the same shape, and the flooded interior regions are staying flooded. Governments that tried to coordinate a global response have mostly stopped, because every government is dealing with its own version of the same catastrophe with nothing left over to send anyone else. New structural codes assume the ground might stop holding things down again, with no guarantee it will not happen twice. Stickman figures are relearning instincts that used to be unconscious, checking that furniture is bolted down, avoiding upper floors, flinching at any sound that resembles the groan a ceiling makes before it decides to leave. Coastal populations have relocated inland in numbers no infrastructure was built to hold, and the strain is its own slow disaster, still accelerating, still without an edge. A full year after the 60 seconds, the thing that has changed permanently is not any single structure or coastline. It is the assumption every stickman figure used to make without knowing they were making it, that the ground would keep doing what the ground has always done, that a foot on a floor was a fact rather than an arrangement. That assumption held for the entire history of every stickman figure who ever lived, until one afternoon it did not, for 60 seconds. And 60 seconds turned out to be enough.